2 weeks before my wedding, I overheard my fiancée secretly plotting to marry me for my assets and run back to her ex. So I exposed her in front of everyone and watched her world crumble. Welcome to my channel. Let's begin today's story. I overheard my fiancée secretly planning to marry me, then divorce me for half my assets and run back to her ex. So I expose her in front of everyone and was her plans crumble. I, 29, thought I had it all figured out. I'd work my ass off to build a life for myself, a small but growing business, a house. And what I thought was the perfect relationship, my fiancé, 27, and I was supposed to get married in just a couple of weeks. She'd been by my side for years. And I really believe she had my back. She didn't come from much, which made me think she understood the grind and appreciated what we had. She always talked about how proud she was of me, how she admired my drive. It was easy to believe her. I mean, why wouldn't I? Relationships are built on trust, right? But man, looking back now, I can see all the little things I brushed off as nothing turns out. They were giant red flags. She constantly talked about her ex, let's call him rich guy, not like she missed him, but more like she wanted me to know what I was being measured against. He was loaded, she'd say, and used to take her on these crazy trips, shower her with gifts, blah blah, she'd always follow it up with. But I left him because he wasn't real like you, and I'd not along thinking I'd won the lottery with her. What an idiot. The entitlement started showing up in small ways. She once told me to fire one of my employees, someone who'd been with me since I started the business. The woman was in her 50s and had been nothing but loyal, but my fiancé thought she didn't fit the image of the company. Her exact words were, "Don't you want your team to look young and modern? She's holding you back." I shut that down real quick, but it turned into this huge argument. Another time she hosted a girls' night at some fancy place and charged the bill to my business card. When I found out, she said, "It's a networking expense, you should be thanking me." I was furious and canceled the card she had access to, but I still let her talk her way out of it. She even had a problem with my hobbies. I like hiking and woodworking. Nothing crazy to stuff I enjoyed online. But she'd always make fun of it. Who was time for that when we could be doing something productive? She'd say she'd push me to go to fancy events or dinners with her instead. Like that was more important at the time. I thought all of this was just normal relationship stuff. People clash, right? You compromise, you move on. But none of it felt like compromising. Now that I know what she was really thinking 3 weeks before the wedding, I got home early from a meeting. I wasn't trying to sneak around or anything. But as I walked in, I heard her on the phone. She was in the bedroom talking loud enough that I could hear her from the hall. I was about to call out when something stopped me. Her tone was weird, like she was laughing and bragging about something. Then I heard her say, "It's all falling into place once the wedding's done. And we combine finances. I'll file for divorce. You won't know what hit him, and don't worry, babe. I'll be back with you soon." I froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was laughing, saying how clueless I was, and how she'd get half of everything. She even called me boring and said I was just a stepping stone. I stood there for what felt like forever, listening to her talk about her big plans with her ex. Then she hung up, and I just left. I didn't even bother going inside that night. I stayed at a buddy's place. I didn't tell him what was going on yet, because I needed to figure it out myself first. By the next morning, I had a plan. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. I explained what I'd overheard, and he immediately told me to lock down my assets. Thankfully, the house was in my name, and she wasn't legally tied to the business. But just to be safe, I updated all my accounts and made sure there was no way she could touch anything. I also bought a small voice recorder and placed it in the living room. If she was willing to talk so openly on the phone, I figured it wouldn't take long to get proof. And I was right. Over the next week, I caught her having multiple conversations with her friends about her plan. One time, she said, "It's not like he'll fight back. He's such a pushover. By the time he realizes what's happening, I'll already have what I want." Another time, she talked about her wedding demands, laughing about how she was squeezing me for upgrades because I owed her. The audacity was insane. She even said she was doing me a favor by sticking around as long as she had. I kept my cool the entire time. I acted normal, played the part of the clueless fiancé, and even agreed to some of her ridiculous wedding requests just to keep her off my trail. 2 weeks later, on the day of what was supposed to be our wedding, I asked her to meet me at the venue early. I told her we needed to go over some last-minute details before the guests arrived. She showed up in her dress looking like she thought she'd already won, but instead of walking into a wedding, Set up, she walked into a room full of her parents, my family, and a few close friends. I was standing at the front with a stack of papers and a USB drive. "What's going on?" she asked, her smile fading fast. I didn't waste time. This isn't a wedding, it's an intervention. I said, "I know what you've been planning, and everyone here is about to find out too." "What are you talking about?" she said, trying to laugh it off. "You're acting crazy." I pulled out the USB drive and played one of the recordings for everyone to hear. It was her telling her friend how she couldn't wait to leave me and get back with Rich Guy. Her voice filled the room, and she couldn't deny it was her. Her parents looked mortified. My mom, who had never fully trusted her, looked like she wanted to throw something when the recording ended. I said, "You were going to ruin my life for a guy who dumped you. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" She started crying, saying, "It's not what it sounds like." I was just venting. I didn't mean any of it. I wasn't buying it. "You've been plotting this for months. I have hours of recordings. Don't even try to deny it." She switched tactics, turning on the waterworks and saying I was humiliating her in front of everyone. Then she had the nerve to say, "After everything I've done for you, you owe me an explanation for this." I laugh because what else could I do at that point? What I owe you is nothing. "You're lucky. I didn't call the cops for trying to scam me." She started yelling, saying I was ruining her life. She even tried to get her parents to defend her, but they were too embarrassed to say a word. Eventually, the venue staff, Ed, her out after she was escorted out. The room was dead silent. Everyone just stood there, unsure of what to say or do. My mom finally walked over and hugged me. "I had a feeling about her," she said quietly. Her support meant a lot in that moment, even though I was still trying to process everything that had just gone down. Her parents approached me looking completely ashamed. Her dad mumbled something about how they didn't raise her to be like this, and her mom said they were sorry for what I'd gone through. I wasn't interested in hearing their apologies, though. I just wanted them to take her and leave after everyone cleared out. I stayed at the venue for a while to wrap my head around things. I just dodged a massive bullet, but the fallout wasn't over yet, and the days that followed my ex-fiancée showed just how entitled and shameless she really was first. She tried to convince me to pay for the wedding expenses. "You called it off, so it's on you to cover the costs," she argued, as if I was supposed to reward her for plotting against me. I didn't even respond to that one. I just blocked her number. Then she started telling mutual friends that I had overreacted and that she'd only been joking about the divorce plan. According to her, I was paranoid and insecure, and she had done nothing wrong. Luckily, I'd already shared the recordings with my closest friends, so her attempts to turn people against me didn't work. Most of them cut her off completely once they heard the truth. But she didn't stop there. One day, she showed up at my house claiming she wanted to talk things through. I refused to let her in, but she stood on the porch yelling about how I owed her the house because she'd helped make it a home. I reminded her that the house was in my name, that she hadn't contributed a dime, and that she had no legal claim to anything she eventually left, but not before screaming that I was selfish and heartless. The most absurd stunt she pulled was trying to take my dog. She'd never shown much interest in him before. But now she suddenly claimed they had a special bond, and that it would be rude to separate them. She even tried to guilt-trip me, saying, "Don't you want him to be with someone who loves him just as much as you do?" I shut that down immediately by showing her the adoption papers, which were in my name. I told her if she ever came near my property again, I called the police. That was the last time she tried anything in person for a while. She kept up the drama on social media. She posted vague attention-seeking messages like, "When people show you who they really are, believe them, and some people just can't handle a strong woman." I ignored it all. People who knew me knew the truth, and I wasn't about to waste my energy defending myself online. Eventually, she disappeared from my life completely. Her parents reached out once to apologize again and let me know she'd moved back in with them. They seemed genuinely mortified by her behavior, but I wasn't interested in staying in touch. Now, a few months later, I'm in a much better place. The business is doing great, and I've started focusing on the things that actually make me happy. I've gone on a few solo hiking trips, finished some woodworking projects, and even adopted a second dog to keep my first one company looking back. I can't believe how blind I was to all the signs, the way she talked about her ex, the entitled demands, the little digs of my hobbies. It all adds up. Now I ignored it because I didn't want to believe she was capable of something like this. But she was, and she probably always had been. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's to trust my gut and protect myself. I've set boundaries now that I'll never let anyone cross again, as much as this whole thing sucked. I'm grateful I found out the truth before it was too late. She thought she was playing me, but in the end she played herself. I've moved on and she's stuck with nothing but the mess she created.